Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, Relmar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We're proudly coming to you through the ever-expanding X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, and can also be found on our website, thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring Bespelled. When we think of spells, we often envision a candlelit room circled with witches and warlocks, draped in hooded velvet robes, muttering mysterious incantations designed to bespell some unsuspecting soul into doing things against their will. It's no wonder, from cackling hags over a cauldron and love potions to voodoo dolls, magical spells have been used to impose another's will upon the individual without permission. Many consider magic to be mythical mumbo-jumbo with no basis in science or reality. Yet, all magic is an organized set of rituals designed to enable the practitioner to wield matter at the quantum level. When properly performed by a well-trained practitioner, these rituals have a profound effect on the material world. Believe it or not, this stuff really works. While spells can indeed be imposed to do harm or artificially influence individuals and events, when responsibly wielded with permission, these same spells can be used to heal and enhance lives. Take, for instance, the voodoo doll. Found in African shamanic traditions, this doll is simply a surrogate designed to help the practitioner focus their quantum level work on a particular individual. It can be used without permission to poke needles in, so to speak, or with intention to do no harm, and through permission to do long-distance healing. Magic in and of itself is much like a gun. It's not the gun that kills or protects, it's the individual wielding it. Another little-known fact about magic and spells is that we are all unwittingly using them. From magical uses, words and intent can affect outcome. Every word or intent we consciously or unconsciously propagate has an effect at the quantum level. Anything affecting the quantum level eventually impacts the physical world. My original shamanic teacher, a Lakota shaman, taught that the power of word goes on long after the sound is gone. He said every word we utter carries forward to the 7th generation. Our words are to be guarded and carefully used. To overuse them is to disempower them. To use them unconsciously is to desecrate our world and compromise the future. He taught me shamanic healing techniques designed to unbind curses and spells that were consciously or unconsciously cast on a person by others. While this may seem fanciful, consider the person who's told during their childhood that they'll never amount to anything. As an adult, try as they may, they're not successful until the spell is broken. Their ability to succeed was bound up at the quantum level due to the dire predictions of a loving but fearful parent. Before we point fingers to those who may have unwittingly cast spells on us, let's take into consideration that the most harmful and binding spells are the ones we cast on ourselves. What goes through your mind? Every thought and belief, spoken or unspoken, has a profound effect at the quantum level. Consciously or unconsciously, we actually create our reality through our thoughts, words, and beliefs. If we're thinking or saying negative things about ourselves or our lives, we're actually creating that reality. Spells can be used to consciously wield this ability. They can also be used to remove bindings of spells inappropriately cast. We need not obtain a master's degree in magic to wield this skill, but rather simply practice mindfulness. If we watch what's going on in our mind, if we observe what we're saying and intending, if we're careful of the thought forms and beliefs we expose ourselves to, we can magically recreate our experience and our world. Our guest this hour, Judika Illes, fell in love with the magical arts as a child and has been studying them ever since. Judika is an author of numerous books, and after this commercial break, I'll introduce Judika. Together, she and I will explore the amazing world of magic, so don't you go away. You're listening to The Science of Magic. Prior innovative episodes can always be found on our website, thescienceofmagic.net. The Science of Magic is produced by Relmar McConnell Media Company, Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Though the world seems in turmoil around us, let's not lose our way. The stars still shine down, blessing us with their light. The sun rises every morning, chasing away the cold and darkness. There are good people of service in this world. We have much to be grateful for as we're wrapped in the arms of all of God's creation. This is Gwilda Wiyaka, host of the Science of Magic Radio, wishing you and yours a very Merry Christmas. I hope your holiday is filled with comfort and joy as you're surrounded by those you love. I'd like to thank all of you for being our loyal listeners on the X-Zone Broadcast Network and for joining us on this grand adventure called life. As the New Year's dawns, let us all stand in truth as we embrace peace. Welcome back. This is the Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Judika Illes. She's the author of numerous books, including the Encyclopedia of 5,000 Spells, the Encyclopedia of Spirits, the Big Book of Practical Spells, and the Encyclopedia of Witchcraft. Judika has worked as a professional card reader and spiritual counselor for over 2 decades. She's the editor of the brand new anthology of vintage esoteric fiction, the Weiser Book of the Fantastic and Forgotten. Her website is JUDIKAILLES.com. That's JUDIKAILLES.com. Judy, thank you for joining us on Science of Magic.
Oh, thank you for having me, Gwilda. I'm very happy to be here.
This should be a lot of fun. You're quite the expert on spells, it looks like. So would you
Apparently. I find myself so.
So I'm not going to make you mad, okay? No voodoo here, okay?
Well, one of the attributes of a good spellcaster is self-control, control of your own emotions. It's very important.
Yeah, absolutely it is. So would you define magic for us?
For me, and this is my definition, but it's a definition that's based on many ancient traditions, particularly that of ancient Egypt, magic is a current of energy that runs through basically everything, everything that's natural, and different types of energy. So different types of beings have different kinds, radiate different types of energy, different types of animals, different types of crystals, herbs, colors. The ancient Greeks believed that vowels had very strong magical energy. Virtually everything, we are essentially always surrounded by magical energy. And you'll know its existence because you'll see its effect on your life. A magic spell, magical energy is natural, it's just there. Magical spells are created by people in an attempt to harness that energy for fulfillment of a goal.
Okay, so if we're harnessing the energy for a fulfillment of a goal, it sounds to me like what you opened with is we have to be responsible because it's just energy. What we do with it is up to us. Is that
Always.
correct?
Oh, I'm an existentialist. Always, you are responsible for your actions. Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the point with a magic spell is that it's conscious. This magical energy, and sometimes this is a negative comparison, but it's the best one I know. I compare it to Marie and Pierre Curie attempting to establish that there was such a thing as radioactive energy. Because if you're familiar with their history, at the time they were doing this, other scientists mocked them. Marie Curie was, like an ancient alchemist. She was starving in a garret attempting to prove her hypothesis. She knew that this existed and others scoffed. And I would say magical energy is a very positive energy. It's intended to improve life. It's not intended to, create havoc or destruction or be, an outlet for negative emotions. I would, I would suggest that I think that stereotype of, the evil practitioner is very much a stereotype by, millennia of people who have had fear. It's not necessarily accurate. The reality is that practitioners of magic have had more to fear from authority than the other way around.
Boy, isn't that the truth?
Historically, that has been.
Yeah, exactly. There's a faggot out there with your name on it if you're not careful, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, how do you see magic being used in modern day society?
I think we're living in a renaissance because until really the end of the 20th century, people were not comfortable discussing magic. And now, my books are published by HarperCollins, a huge publishing house, and I teach classes, and we don't have to hide in the basement. Ideally, magic is a tool to create happiness and empowerment. The best use of magic is self-transformation, to create the future you want for yourself and to help you become who you would like to be, to achieve your highest potential, to discover the magical treasures that are within you. I think we all have powers of one kind or another. They're not that supernatural. They're natural. There's a lot of fear. I really liked what you were saying at the beginning of the show, because those little curses that are often given to children by parents or teachers or other forms of authority, and they may do it from frustration, or they may do it in attempt of being helpful. Things like "you'll never amount to anything," you "don't run, you'll fall," things like that are so petrifying and paralyzing. And the ultimate goal of a magic spell is to find your strengths and your gifts and your powers and use them to create the life that you would like for yourself.
So, Judika, what I hear you doing here is speaking of aligning with the laws of nature to enhance our natural abilities, and that would be a positive use of magic?
Yes. I'm cautious. People tend to talk about positive use of magic versus negative use of magic. It's not the magic. It's the practitioner. If angry people do angry things, people who are perpetually, and everybody has a bad day, but people who are embroiled in negative emotions, if they are filled with jealousy and rage and anger and resentment, those people will cast negative spells because it's who they are. Magic itself is a neutral force,
Exactly.
much more so than a gun. You know, if you want to, I wasn't kidding when I said that one of the important tenets of being a successful magical practitioner is self-discipline, self-knowledge, self-control. You want to approach your spells from a sense of love and respect and serenity, if you can manage that. You want to take those negative emotions because, often magic spells are a response to a crisis. And so you want to take your fear and your rage and your anger and channel it into something, into a spell that helps you create a better situation.
Boy, that is the key.
That is the goal. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And
I would be cautious because a lot of people talk about, curses and voodoo dolls and this and that, but the reality is that in many cases, there's a very fine line between a curse and a justice spell. Magic has historically been the province of the disempowered, the poor, the oppressed. Money and brute force are far quicker and easier to wield than magic spells. So often, when justice is not forthcoming, when there is no justice, people will turn to a magic spell. And then, but we do have to examine the roots of that.
Yeah, we certainly do. And you know what I've noticed in the years of my practice is that when people fall under their own distortions and unprocessed feelings and use magic in a negative way, they can only do that so long because you're breaking the laws of nature and it has a natural but nasty kickback. Have you seen that?
Well, I think that's the basic law of the universe. What you reap, you shall sow. I mean, that's, a little biblical injunction, but there's truth to that. If you are someone who perpetually puts out negative energy, you will not have a happy life.
Yeah.
That's just a given, and, depending on how long it comes back to you, but that's a fact. If you are continually operating out of anger and frustration and jealousy, you will not achieve happiness.
Right, like draws like, huh?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So how long has magic been around? Do you have any idea?
Forever. I think it's supreme. I think that magic as an energy has been here. There's an ancient Egyptian story. It's actually part of a creation myth. According to this myth, the Creator created the universe, looked out upon it, and saw that all was not good, and that people were in for heartache. And so the last creation was magic, magical energy, which the ancient Egyptians called Heka, Heka is how we transliterate it. And that magical energy was designed to ward off the blows of heartache. And that's what it's there for.
Amazing.
There are people who do wonderful things, and there are people who don't. There are people who, the history of the world is people doing terrible things to each other. And I am very cautious against holding magical energy up to a double standard, because there's certainly political abuse, financial abuse, brute force. Magical abuse is just one of a series of terrible things that people do to each other.
Yeah, I think it's the hidden aspect of magic that has people more afraid of it than the brute force through finances, don't you?
I don't know. If somebody casts a spell against you, that can be broken. And a magical practitioner is constantly doing cleansing spells, constantly doing warding spells. A lot of things that are sent against people are not conscious. There is something that the ancients described as the evil eye. It's a negative energy, and it can be sent spontaneously. So that's not, it could be focused on someone spontaneously without planning. And so experienced magical practitioners do take care to protect themselves I'd almost rather have someone cast a negative spell against me than be mugged. I worked in New York City in the late 70s, early 80s, and that trek from my office to my home was terrifying. Everybody I knew had been mugged, so I know of what I speak. Having and coming from people who have experienced all kinds of violence, I don't know. I would prefer the magical. I
Well,
think that's easier to deal with.
you and I are on the same page there. It's like I think there's a lot of fear of the unknown, but when you know, it's a much kinder, gentler way, and it can be undone.
But
So
it
it's
no
a
longer has to be unknown.
okay.
We have
I'm
so
sorry.
many
We're
books.
gonna have to pick up with this on the other side of a break. Judica and I will return to our discussion after this short break. We're coming to you through the land of leading-edge paranormal broadcasting, the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Don't miss out on the other fine shows on xzbn.net. You're listening to The Science of Magic, thescienceofmagic.net. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka. Judith and I will be back, so don't you go away. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Judika Illes, the author of numerous books on magic and the editor of the brand new anthology of vintage esoteric fiction, the Weiser Book of the Fantastic and Forgotten. Judika, we were starting onto a really interesting subject, which is one of my favorites. And it's like, people traditionally have been afraid of magical practices and, fearful that, oh my gosh, they're evil and things are going to go bad. And you and I both are in agreement that there's a lot worse things out in the world. In fact, that the magical practices can do extreme good. Would you speak to this a little bit for us?
Well, there's been a tremendous amount of propaganda. And so there's a reason people are afraid. I thought what you said before was so interesting, that, people are afraid of the unknown, and that is absolutely, absolutely true. But there is really no reason for, in the English-speaking world, for any of this to be unknown, because there are tons of books. There are so many books that it's hard sometimes to wade through them. And I tell my students to read everything. Just read everything. Don't let anyone control what you're able to read. And there's so much information about magical practice. I have a book, the Big Book of Practical Spells, that is literally a how-to. If you want to know how it's done, whether because you want to cast spells yourself or just because you want to understand the process, you will live. This is just a law of nature. There is, I think, the desire to separate magic and the magical arts, to call it supernatural or preternatural or, paranormal, is somewhat deceptive. It's natural. Magic is something that you find all over the world. We were talking before about where it originates. The oldest writings we have documents, surviving documents, have to do with magic spells and taxes, because those two things are eternal. It is. You can go anywhere in the world. If an airplane dropped you anywhere in the world, from a popular place to an incredibly remote location, I guarantee there are two things that they'll have in common: some knowledge of a magical practice, whether it's perceived positively or negatively, they know about it, and ghost stories. Those are the two universals. You will find them everywhere on Earth. And I teach spellcasting, and one of the things I teach is try it for yourself. A really basic thing to do is take an hour or a day and be nice. Smile at everyone. Give compliments. Just radiate sunniness and happiness, and watch its effect on the people you meet. At the checkout counter, be nice to the checkout person and watch. They may be perplexed because they're not used to it, but they'll be a little nicer to the person behind you. The converse, take an hour or a day, an hour is probably better, and be mean. Snarl at people, frown, watch your effect on them. It's very quick. They will go from having a good day to not having a good day. And that is your power. You have the power to affect that change on other people, on people who are close to you and people who are strangers. So magical practice is just taking that to a higher degree. You can use magical spells for empowerment, to develop psychic ability, to heal. Particularly, and this is not, you should not go to a doctor. Magic spells work hand in hand with real life because they are real life. So if you are doing spells for employment, you still have to go and look for a job. There are spells to increase lottery luck. You still have to buy a ticket. And so healing spells are magic is often the avenue of last resort. If you have an illness and they cannot find a cause and they cannot diagnose you and no one can treat you and you've tried everything else, sometimes it's worth trying to cast a spell. If nothing is going right, then it may be worth exploring why. And sometimes it is very rarely a curse. I get a lot of email, I think I've been cursed. It happens, but it's rare, and it's even more rare for it to be effective. People don't believe in the power of blessing, but they're very quick to believe anyone who says they can curse you. People are very willing to believe in the negative rather than the positive. But there are many reasons. As often being sort of blocked and challenged and frustrated, and frustrating too possibly, comes from sort of natural, spiritual, magical causes. There are things known as blocks, which could just be sort of an accumulation of, the wording isn't I think evocative. They call it spiritual debris, which is sort of like dust. If you look at your furniture, sometimes there's that piece of dust, a piano, that just accumulates more dust than the rest. And it's believed that there are people like that. And then you do cleansing spells. And a cleansing spell, when I teach spell casting, cleansing spells are a really good beginner spell, because when you do them, you should feel cleaner. You'll know right away.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, being able to do self-management and self-care through magic is
right.
We should start there, yes.
And you can do it via smoke, something like sage or frankincense. You can do it through bathing with salt and a little vinegar. I mean, these are inexpensive, simple things that you can do for yourself that will improve your life. You can cleanse with sound. The clanking of metal is believed to disperse negative energy.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch too. So
Yeah.
how does intention relate to spell casting? conscious and unconscious?
Well, people ask me a lot, do you have to believe in the spell for it to work? And, and they're surprised when I tell them, no, you don't need to believe in the spell for it to work anymore, for you need to believe in rain for it to fall. But you do have to believe. Remember that a spell has a goal. You do have to believe that your life could possibly get a little better. Because if you are invested in your misery, then essentially it's like driving with the brakes on. Why do your spells not work is a fascinating topic that we could talk about for hours. And one of them is that self-sabotage. And I think intention, and different people mean different things by that word intention. But I think that intention to improve is crucial. I think it's the two things you need for a spell to work are a human being, because this is a human art, so a human being with a goal. And that goal can be caused by love, it can be caused by desire, it can be caused by fear. Oh my God, I don't want this to happen. I have to take some sort of an action. And I think that is, I'm cautious with the word intention because, I write lists for myself. Every day I'll write lists what I want to accomplish that day, and that is my intention. I can tell you that my intention is not always accomplished. So I'll look the next day, and sometimes I've accomplished totally other things that day. So, I think the thing with spellcasting is that it will teach you to really listen to the meaning of words. Words have so much power, and they are so crucial. And I say this for myself because I see the change in me as well as in other people. We tend to speak casually. We use words without totally understanding their meaning and their nuance and all the implications. And spell casting will teach you not to do that, because the most dangerous thing about a spell is that it might work. And so be careful what you ask for, and be careful how you ask for it. Because let's say you really, really desperately need, you need a new refrigerator. You need a new refrigerator. And then somebody gives you like a silver charm of a refrigerator for a bracelet. Well, your spell worked. You got a refrigerator, but it wasn't the refrigerator you wanted. And that's that's a superficial version of that. But sometimes we ask for things that we don't totally understand, and so we have to be careful.
And don't we often ask for things that are solutions to perceived problems rather than what we really need for the situation at hand?
Oh, yeah. Or what we think we want, or what other people want for us rather than what we secretly want. It's not always a bad thing when your spell doesn't work. Often, we ask for something, and then years later, we're so grateful that we didn't get it. And it doesn't have to be magic. Think of, every time they arrest a serial killer, there is some woman who is thinking how much she liked him in high school. Wow, I wanted to go out with him. And now she's considering herself blessed that he didn't pay her any attention. You can really, really, really want a job, and 6 months later the company goes out of business, and your sadness over not getting the job is transformed into relief. So sometimes when spells don't work, that's our guardian angels watching out for us.
Yeah, most times, right?
Often, I think.
Yeah. We're going to have to take a break here pretty soon, but on the other side of this break, I would really like to go into love spells, marriage, and magic. Do you think we can do that?
Sure.
That sounds like fun. Okay, so um, on the other side of the break, when we're going into these, I want everyone to kind of think, how many times have we unconsciously tried to set our intent, like you said, to be with someone that it may not be what they want? And what effect does that have on our world, on their world? And how unconsciously do we bind ourselves to each other and them to us, and then never break that binding, and it affects our life for the rest of our life? Interesting questions, and I'll bet Judika has some interesting answers for us. Judika and I will be back shortly. You're listening to The Science of Magic, thescienceofmagic.net, the place where altruistic professionals of science and esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. We're brought to you by the leader in paranormal spirituality and alternative health programming, the X Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. Don't you go away, because we will be back with some fun stuff to talk about. Though the world seems in turmoil around us, let's not lose our way. The stars still shine down, blessing us with their light. The sun rises every morning, chasing away the cold and darkness. There are good people of service in this world. We have much to be grateful for as we're wrapped in the arms of all of God's creation. This is Gwilda Wiyaka, host of the Science of Magic Radio, wishing you and yours a very Merry Christmas. I hope your holiday is filled with comfort and joy as you're surrounded by those you love. I'd like to thank all of you for being our loyal listeners on the X Zone Broadcast Network and for joining us on this grand adventure called life. As the New Year's dawns, let us all stand in truth as we embrace peace. Welcome back. This is the Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of service to the world. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka, and one of those people of service is our guest this hour, JUDIKA ILLES. She's the author of numerous books on magic and the editor of the Weiser Book of the Fantastic and Forgotten. I promised everybody that we would talk about love and magic on the other side of the break, so you're on. Tell me about love spells.
There are many. They are among, I would say, the most popular topics of magic spells are money, protection, and love. I have a book called Encyclopedia of 5,000 Spells, which has more than 5,000 spells in it. It's a big 1,000-pager. And the biggest section is the love spells. The best love spells are simple and they're elaborate. The best love spells are for self-love, and that's important because it's very hard to have a happy life or a happy love life if you're not happy with yourself, if you don't love yourself and feel that you deserve happiness. The second best type of love spells are those where you, for those who are seeking love, to ask the universe to send you the right person. I wasn't kidding when I said before the break, about the serial killer. People, sometimes we look at someone and we think, they're the best thing since sliced bread, and we're just sure that's the right person for us. But we may not really know everything about them or know how compatible we'll be or the secrets they may have in their heart. I think the statistic for divorce in the U.S. right now is something like 50%. And, it is something, to take seriously. So be careful. Be careful with spells. I know at the beginning of the show you were discussing spells cast on other people to 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 essentially impose your will on them. And it can be done, but it's really not recommended. There are spells such as binding spells. Binding spells, there are two kinds of, the term binding spell is sometimes used to describe a protection spell where you bind someone's power so they cannot harm you or harm someone else. And sometimes that's a necessary type of thing. If you know child abusers, various kinds of abusers, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But then there are those love spells where you are binding another heart to you for eternity, and don't do it because essentially what you're creating is a stalker. You can people will tell you, oh, love spells don't work. Well, they do, but not necessarily in the way that you want them to, because magic spells are a mysterious and profound and powerful art. They're not a cake mix. When you buy, and that's confusing because when you look at spells, like if you look at my book of 5,000 spells, you will see the spells are written out with instructions, step 1, step 2, step 3, and they might look like a recipe. But when you buy a box of mac and cheese mix or a cake mix, there are instructions on the back, and if you follow them, 99.9% sure that you're going to get what looks like the picture on the front. That's not how it works with magic spells. It's complicated. And so you can make someone attach themselves to you. You may even be able to make someone love you, but you can only make them love you the way they know how to love, not the way you want them to love you. And that's 50% divorce rate. Remember that, because there are a lot of unhappy relationships, and if you bind them, it is hard to get out of them. Then you have someone, you want to leave yourself that escape route. You want to be able to leave.
That escape clause in there.
Oh yeah, I would say one of the nicest love spells, and an effective one. We use the power of the moon to affect change. When you want something to increase, we work with the new moon as it waxes up to the full. And then if we want to get rid of something, if we want to make something leave, we work with the waning moon, so as it goes from the full to the dark moon. Example, if you want to increase your finances, you would work with the waxing moon. But if you wanted to decrease debt, then you would work with the waning moon. And so a nice spell is to go out at the new moon, stand under the rays of the moon if you can, and ask the universe to bless you with the right love for you. Ask it, you can come up with qualities that you want. I want this type of a person. I don't want that kind of a person. You can make like a dating list for yourself. Try to be specific. Try to ask for what you want. Do you want a kind person? Do you want a sexy person? Do you want, a person who shares your interest in, philanthropy or whatever it might be? And then put it out there and let yourself be blessed.
Beautifully stated. Judika, before we run out of time, I would love to have you share with our listeners where they can find your books and services.
Oh, my books can be found wherever fine books are sold. Seriously, I am published by two wonderful publishers, Weiser and HarperCollins, and their distribution is great. And you can find my services on my website, which is my name, JUDIKAILLES.com, JUDIKAILLES.com.
Thank you so much. Marriage is actually, it's performed in a ceremony, and ceremonies are magical. And so we're, with the agreement of the couple and the agreement of their families and friends, they're creating a binding. And I think very often we don't recognize that's what we've done. So 50% of us getting divorced, how do we uncreate that binding? And what do you think the effect is when we don't?
Well, there's often lasting repercussion for years. There's that sort of traumatic feeling. Sometimes it's done well and harmoniously, and sometimes there's a dissonance. in my books, 5,000 Spells, and in Big Book of Practical Spells, there are wedding spells, because you're right, a wedding spell incorporates all sorts of magical energies and promises and vows and ritual, and there are also divorce spells. There are things that you can do, baths that you can take to sever cleanly the ties between people. But I think really one of the most crucial things is really paying attention to words. When you have those marriage vows, think about what you're promising. Say what you mean, and say your intent. Say your goal. Don't just whether you write your own vows, or if you like the traditional vow, then use them. But be aware of what you're saying. Very, very crucial not to just parrot words because someone puts them in front of you. Be aware, because your word is your honor, and your word is essentially you. So be careful.
Be careful what you do with your words.
Yeah.
Do you think that our coming of age, right now it's like we're kind of unconscious of our passages, and it used to be there would be spells or traditional ceremonies for a person to become an adult, for a person to become an elder. Do you have some stuff in your book that covers that?
Yeah. And I think that also depends on tradition. I think within the pagan communities there still are traditions and rites for young girls who are entering their fertile years, for women who are passing out of their fertile years, for all sorts of life passages. There certainly are rituals and new ones being developed all the time. And I would just like to put out there that spells and rituals are created by people. So if you ever see a lack, you're a person too. Create one. I started writing because I wanted to buy a book. I could see it in my head, and it didn't exist. So I wrote it. And that really applies to all sorts of stuff. If you are longing for some kind of a rite or a ritual, maybe that's your inspiration to actually create it.
And do you have some basic principles that people can use to kind of like use as a skeleton for creating new spells?
Think about what you really want. That is the focus. That is the first thing. Really, really try to be specific with what you want. I want to get married is very vague because, I want to get married. Well, then, you could certainly sign up to a dating thing and take the first person who answers. But what do you really want? Do you want to be loved? Do you want to have a partner? Do you want to, and if so, what kind of a partner? What do you want them to partner with you in? Try to really narrow down your desires. It really helps. It will help you live better in general, even if you don't cast a spell. But if you do cast a spell, it makes it more likely to succeed. And spells are always cast in the present tense. I am happy, not I will be happy. I am rich, not I will be rich.
Beautifully spoken. We're going to. Time flies, and we're out of it. So thanks so much for being on the show. Our guest this hour has been author JUDIKA ILLES. Her website, JUDIKAILLES.com. This has been The Science of Magic. Remember, you can always listen to past thought-provoking episodes on our website, thescienceofmagic.net. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge, comfort with love, and live a magical life.